Welcome, everyone, to the All Surface Show. I am one of two co hosts here, David E.J. Berger. Normally, I am in the betting streets hosting Match Point number 9, a Tennis Bets podcast. But my main man, Steve, and I are forging the general tennis talk streets with this show. We are very excited to not have the shackles of betting holding us down. Steve, a lot of people know him as Mr. Ace Previews himself, all the way down in Melbourne, Australia. Welcome in, Steve.
Thank you very much. Good morning here from sunny Melbourne. It's starting to slowly but surely warm up down here, which makes sense because as I look at the calendar, 6 weeks away from tennis happening here for 2026. So not too far away. I'm sure it'll be before we know it. But yeah, as you said, it's a nice opportunity this show to talk about things without having to worry about any odds at the end of a sentence or at the end of a thought. How are you going up in the Northern Hemisphere?
We're doing well. It's been rainy here in California where I'm based, but the sun is peeking out right as we're about to record, so things are changing. And yes, Steve, we are 52, count them, 52 days away from the qualifying of the Australian Open, which I believe marks the beginning of the tournament for true tennis degenerates like ourselves.
Well, I remember, I mean, you don't have to go back too far, you have to go back about 2 years, when here in Melbourne, you could go to the qualifying of the Australian Open for free. But now there's a cost associated with everything.
Oh, really?
It feels like it, yeah.
I think the US Open is still free.
Yeah, the Australian Open, maybe we'll get into it a little bit closer to the tournament, but I feel like I'm actually not going to as many days this year as I have in previous years because it just feels like the cost and the value of it just doesn't quite match up, I think, the same way it used to. I think even you go back 3-4 years, you used to sit on a main court and you'd get 3 matches on a day session. Whereas now you get 2 because they're a bit worried about those matches kind of going long and bleeding into the night session, and then there being a 3 a.m. finish that there's complaints about. But they dropped the amount of tennis that you get on those courts, but the price went up. So it's just one of those mismatch things. I think when you combine that with the extra day on the first Sunday, so that extra day of main draw, yeah, it's just getting busier and busier. And probably as a tennis lover, I think you see this a lot of some of the big tournaments, that there's just a lot of opportunities for people to go but not actually see a tennis ball get hit. So it just makes everything more difficult to get around and go and see the matches that you want to. So I'll probably spend more time on it, I think, this year, weather permitting. But yeah, it's probably not the same as it was 5-10 years ago from an enjoyment day-to-day perspective. The most I've enjoyed tennis the last couple of years was when I was lucky to go to Geneva to the 250 for a couple of days, because you just feel more up close and personal and you just kind of in amongst it, I think, a little bit more. So hopefully over the next couple of years I can get to some other different tournaments in different places and try and get that joy, I guess, with the actual watching of tennis a little bit more than you probably get here now at the Australian Open.
Oh, you enjoyed joy, Steve? I do as well. The joy is actually being sucked out of Indian Wells, which is my background. It's my tournament, and we're not that far away from that event realistically either. And I am priced out so far. I'm a little concerned. It's a tricky thing because no one's going to go in the opening, so I'll be there opening day likely, and throughout. But we've been going the first weekend, my family and I, for the last 3 years, and it's the ways in which we've been handling lodging are nuked, and the prices are also. The grounds pass are still okay, but the Stadium One Pass is just gone. And the first year I went, having the Stadium One ticket was really nice with the children. To have an assigned seat that you go to for a reasonable price, which is I think it's right now for the Stadium One for that weekend is $150 if not $200, and it was $75 a couple years ago. Pretty brutal. All right, Steve. Well, I thought it would be fun. We've wrapped up the ATP Tour season. We're wrapped up the WTA season. Although there are some challengers going on, and those points will count for next year, I believe, a wraparound calendar. So, in essence, the season's wrapped up, even though there is action. I thought it might be fun to talk about the top 10. We had Alcaraz and Sinner. Alcaraz finishes as year-end number 1, even though he lost the Tour Finals in a pretty good match versus Sinner. I know he had an MTO and was a little banged up with his leg, but overall, I felt that was a pretty quality match. And here, let me bring this up. And we talked about it when we did a supporter show for MP9 Tennis. I felt like FAA and De Minaur were worthy semifinalists to end the year. And I know that you've been pretty impressed by your countryman De Minaur post Laver Cup. What do you think of De Minaur's Tour Finals? The bounce back, really nice bounce back, and him finishing as the world number 7. Steve,
It was impressive bounce back, I think, for him at the end. In terms of that comeback from that loss. Obviously, it's a round robin tournament, that group stage, but there's still, there's a lot of pressure in terms of points and prize money and the like, on the line. The tricky thing for me to get my head around with Alex overall is that, I think he came out and made some comments after the Fritz win that he wasn't entirely sure that he could make it through, was it, to the semi-final stage? So then you sit there and you go, oh, well, if he can then beat Taylor Fritz in straight sets with the pressure off, like how much of it is that kind of mental side of the game and, thinking that he belongs and being able to match himself, at that point with the top players. But I think when you look at him, you compare, I guess, how both players are viewed. We've got Taylor Fritz as he got there at 6 and Alex De Minaur at 7. They've got identical ranking points. They've played the same amount of tournaments this year. So they've played 23 tournaments each. But I think they obviously get viewed and perceived quite differently, I think. And that's probably because I think Fritz has shown himself a little bit more at the Grand Slam level. But, I think if you look at Alex's year, I think it's certainly been a big step in the right direction. And when you think about how, his record, yes, his record isn't great against the top 10. But if he sits himself in a top 8 seeding at a Grand Slam, and the Oz Open is the next one coming up, if he's sitting there in a top 8 seed, he's not facing a top 10 player for the better part of the first week and a bit. So it's I've been impressed with how he finished the year. I said particularly after the back end of, I think since he lost in the Davis Cup, and that was played here, was that against Belgium, wasn't it? It was against Collignon, I think it was. Since then, I think he's looked a lot better. I think he did look pretty solid. I feel like since the Laver Cup in particular, he's looked a little bit better in terms of his game. But he himself said against Sinner, he needs to get able to up his first serve and find his first serve in some key moments, which he didn't, and Sinner took advantage. So I think he's coming a long way. But if you look at those players there, ranked 1, as you said, 1 through 10. Do you have anyone there as kind of a big surprise?
A big surprise? No, I would say FAA getting his way into the top 5 is a surprise. Top 10, I don't think is surprising, but finishing year-end 5, although he started out with the bang and he finished with the bang. So good on him for keeping his level throughout all of 2025. some dips during clay, obviously. But I have to say, you know, I believe when we did the off-season or season-long bets with Avery Zimmerman for the MP9 show, FAA was plus 200 just to make the top 20. So he's odds-wise, he has exceeded all expectations. And I want to say it's really, I feel, a product of consistency versus some sort of improvement in his game. I just felt like he was very consistent all year in terms of his service game. He wasn't, spewing in his return game. And I felt like he really took advantage of the spots where he should. You know, the early season in Australia, the indoor part of the calendar. He did leave a lot on the table during grass, but other than that, I felt he really took advantage of the opportunities he had in 2025.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. If you sat back and we spoke about Felix at different points of the season, I think after Adelaide, where he ran through, I think he beat was a quarter in the final there, won the title to start the year. You'd sit there and go, yep, okay, Felix is, you know, at a level somewhat near his best. I think he lost from, was it 2 sets up against Davidovich Fokina at the Oz Open. That then kind of patched through, as you said, you know, he looked okay through the indoor, won Montpellier as well. So, you know, you think about his points and what he's trying to defend for next year. He's got 2 titles he has to defend just in January alone. And then a final in Dubai. So, you know, he was looking great through that first patch. But then, as you said, you know, lost his first match at Indian Wells, lost his second match at Miami, lost his first match at Monte Carlo, and lost his first match at Munich, Madrid. Went back and played the Estoril Challenger, lost there in the first round as well. So, you know, if you think about it, lost first round of Roland Garros, second round of Wimbledon. So he's got although his ranking's probably going to drop back out, potentially out of the top 10, unless he really maintains that level and can defend a lot of those points through January, February. Basically, March through, you know, end of June or, you know, end of July almost, he has, you know, next to no points to defend. So there is every chance that we see him back up and in a burst back around this kind of point. If he can do, you know, if he can put a solid January, February together and at least just defend, you know, a decent portion of those points, which he could do just with a deeper run really at the Australian Open. So there's a lot of opportunity for him, I think, to be able to kind of solidify himself there, but he just has to make the most of, you know, his last couple of months post US Open, using that as a springboard, I think, for 2026.
He did have a couple semifinals on grass, but I guess what I mean, he left some on the table. The second round exit at Wimbledon to Jan-Lennard Struff, who was not having a great 2025 at the time, was not, I think, how he wanted his grass season to end. But he does have a semifinal appearance in Mallorca and Stuttgart. So not terrible, but I do think he also French Open. Now, obviously, clay is a bit of a challenge for him, but he was up 2 sets on Arnaldi before dropping the last 3. So he is a guy who's probably going to get a favorable draw in Roland Garros next year, so he could pick up some points there as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you look at the bottom of the top, you've got the two big serving lefties that have had injury issues but have still managed to make their way to the year-end kind of, you know, top 10 with Ben Shelton and Jack Draper. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of back up. I think Draper, you know, I think everyone's seen the level that he can produce over the last couple of years. It's just, first of all, it was getting that kind of endurance and ability to play 5 sets and to be able to match it at those bigger tournaments. And now it's about kind of keeping his body together for the entirety of the season. But, you know, you look at his, you know, nearly 3,000 ranking points played, you know, the least amount of tournaments out of, I think, anyone ranked, as I work through, anyone ranked in the top 50. He played 17, and the only other two I think that played 18. Well, Yannick Sinner played 18, but you got to go down to Arthur Fils and Grigor Dimitrov as the other two. So, and they're outside the Australian Open seeding. So it's an interesting kind of little pocket, I think, when you look through the rankings. But Jack Draper, I think, has obviously made the most of his opportunities. He just needs to be able to get a full season together, and then that 10 becomes a 5, 4, potentially 3. I think if you look at the the current ranking points, there's a big gap between 1 and 2 and the rest, and there's big opportunity, I think, with Novak holding up one of those 4 spots, playing not a lot of tennis, and he's not going to be around for too many more years. So there's some big opportunities there, I think.
I think what behooves Draper is he is a threat at 3 or 4 majors and pretty much all the thousands off clay. So a lot of opportunity for him to gain points, even if we do have the new 2, as they're called, waiting for him in the final. I think that he is very live to make deep runs across the calendar. And I thought he improved on clay as well. I mean, I know people really overthought it in one of his opening round clay matches versus Marcos Giron, in which he completely annihilated Giron.
Mm-hmm.
He has the loss to Fokina, which was not a great look, but Fokina had a pretty good year. I believe it went 3 sets. It was a little bit unlucky in spots.
Yep.
So,
but then he's still, while he's still developing, he made the final of Madrid. So yes, there's the altitude component there, but it was still the players to beat him through. Madrid, he lost to Casper Ruud in the final. In Rome, he lost to Carlos Alcaraz 6-4, 6-4, which that's still serviceable effort there. He lost to Bublik at Roland Garros in 4 sets in a bit of an up and down game. But then if you think about it, the back end of his season was pretty hampered. His last 4 matches have been 2 at Wimbledon and 2 at the US Open. So there's a big gap there. Didn't play a lot, at the start of the year as well. Just played the Australian Open and Doha in the first 2 months. So there's some pockets again for him to be able to kind of, at least maintain that ranking and kind of hold his own a bit. But I think he just needs to play probably a pretty careful, schedule, because arm/elbow issues can hang around for a pretty long time.
And I think it's going to take him a while to ramp up as well. We saw how even the little layoff that Ben Shelton had, and now granted, the timing on the calendar, it being the end of the season, I think also was a factor in why we saw Shelton kind of tail off in 2025 after he ramped up so much over the summer. But I do believe Jack Draper is going to need some reps to get back to the form we saw the first part of this year, winning Indian Wells. I thought he was playing great going into Indian Wells, so it really wasn't a shock to me that he came through. I mean, it's a shock that he beat Alcaraz, because I do feel like Indian Wells is a place that Alcaraz is going to be a really tough out.
Yeah.
So good on him there.
But I'd like to see him play, if he's fit for January, I'd love to see him play like a, even the United Cup or something, like just something to kind of get a couple of, round robin matches about, maybe then play Kooyong or, one of the exhibitions the week before the Australian Open. Because I just think, he was pretty underdone at the start of last year as well. And I think he came in and then lost, he beat Navone in 5 and then beat Kokkinakis in 5. Was it? And then beat Vukic at 5. And then lost. He had to retire against Alcaraz, and then we didn't see him, again for another month. So, if he can kind of maybe just get, as you said, get some reps on the board, that maybe, and if he wins some of those matches, there's some decent ranking points to be made there in January. But it might be better than rocking up to a tournament cold, in Adelaide or Auckland or somewhere, and being knocked out after one match. At least he's going to get a couple through the round robin nature of the representing his country.
Let's talk about the pair of Americans in the top 10, Taylor Fritz and Ben Shelton. Taylor Fritz finishes the year with 49 wins. That's akin to his last 2 seasons in which he had 53 in 2023, 55 in 2024. But he did play 6 less matches, or six less matches in 2023, 7 less than last year. So he would have gotten over the 50 mark had he been on the court. He picked up an injury earlier in the season, so he was out for a bit. And I want to say, like, I know that American sports fans are frustrated that we don't have a slam champion. And I think that undermines what Taylor Fritz has been doing over the last, few years. I think that he maxes his ceiling as a player. And unfortunately, that's during a time when the new two is also kind of come along. So that's unfortunate, but I do feel like we have Ben Shelton storming into the top 10, and I'm hoping that, we want to see him reach a ceiling, Ben Shelton, but I also hope that he understands the work that Taylor Fritz has put in as a professional over the last, few years, and we see a consistent year over year from Ben Shelton. I think that's one thing he can take away from Taylor Fritz's career is maintaining that really high level over the course of year after year.
Yeah, and I think it's also, as you said, like making the most of those opportunities where, the big names of, Alcaraz and Sinner there potentially in the draw as well to be able to kind of make those deep runs. But I think, Shelton is probably, he said, like you can probably put him in a similar basket in a way to Jack Draper in that, again, like if you look at the back end of the season for Shelton, so he made the quarterfinals at Wimbledon, made the semi-final at Washington, then starting his, North American hardcourt swing, then backed up the next week and won in Canada, and then backed up again the next week to make the quarterfinals of Cincinnati, beat Lehechka, beat Roberto Bautista Agut, which I think we probably both remember that match relatively well. And then it was just a lot of tennis, and I think then it caught up with him again at the US Open with the injury against Manarino, and then you can pretty much, write off for the most part the back end of the season because of the injury. But it's one of those. It can be tricky, I think, for a lot of players, to not overdo it. I think when they get on these kind of hot runs, and I think he really went on an awesome run through the majority of basically the US Open build-up. But it's, he's playing such a big game. It's explosive. It doesn't take much for, even a little bit of fatigue here or there to really add up, from picking up an injury, a small injury that becomes a bigger injury. I think we saw it with Holger Rune, in his last tournament. He picked up an injury on the other side of his body, overcompensating, then, ruptures his Achilles on the other side. I think, they're such finely tuned athletes at that top level that they need to really kind of be careful of how they manage their schedules. I think Shelton's one of those. I think he's a type of player that maybe if he plays a little bit less tennis, if he can find that level, consistently, he might be a player that just doesn't play a lot of 250s and even 500s and can, get by with a really solid ranking, because we've seen how well he can play at Grand Slams in those big moments. I think he just needs his body to hold up more than anything.
Yeah, I don't love the shoulder stuff with a guy whose game is so serve dependent. So we'll see how he manages that moving forward. But I also want to give credit to Fritz for having his best match against Alcaraz at the end of this year in the Tour Finals. Took him to 3, and I thought really took advantage of that opportunity in conditions that Alcaraz not necessarily struggles in, but maybe more vulnerable in. And he does get that first set. It's a 5-7 second set loss, and unfortunately loses the third. But he was right there toe to toe with Alcaraz, and I praise the guy's year over year consistency, but he's still finding ways to have some, even in a loss. I think was a stealing moment for him, and I hope that another thing too, like Fritz, there's this battle of who's the number one. Fritz is a better clay player than Ben Shelton. I mean, we've seen nothing from Shelton in terms of his clay prowess. Did get that win against Sonego at the French Open, but I feel like he's got some room for improvement there.
Yeah. And I think, maybe with Shelton, there's been a little bit of improvement in that back end of the season with his patience, I think, in some aspects of his game, and not necessarily going for the shot a little bit earlier in points, which he has become a little bit accustomed to. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think for him and for Fritz, it's probably the one where you sit there like week to week, you're probably more trusting in Fritz and his level. But if you think about pure ceiling, that maybe that Shelton kind of has that edge if everything clicks. I was just having a look at the they've actually released some of the information for the United Cup, and Jack Draper is playing, so he will be playing for Great Britain, and they're first up against Team Japan. So I feel like that's probably a decent opportunity for him first up to try and find a little bit of form and level. But there's some interesting names there, I think, across the men's and women's in terms of people who've committed. We'll have Alex De Minaur against Casper Ruud, I think, in the first one of the. But yeah, we've got the likes of Zverev, Taylor Fritz, Felix will be playing as well. So another opportunity, I think, for Felix to get some points early and maybe try and do a fair job at defending a fair chunk of the Adelaide ranking points that he's going to lose. Kvoli, Tsitsipas is going to have a crack. So Greece is in. Stan Wawrinka. So I think, when you look at some of the players that have maybe named there, you can see maybe why some of the top players would be pretty keen to have a crack at a couple of round robin singles matches for some decent ranking.
I like the United Cup. I think it's a fun event.
I think it can work well. I think where they probably get a little bit caught out, and maybe they got caught out in the first couple of years, is the number 2 ranked men's and women's singles players probably get a bit stuck, and it's almost a bit of a wasted week if they don't get a chance to play. So if you're going in there, because it's the one men's, one women's, and then the doubles, you can get a little bit caught out with that. I think with the, like if you're the second men's player for Germany, you're not really playing unless Zverev hurts himself, kind of thing. So they need to weigh up whether that's worth sitting there for the week and being a part of that, and the benefits of being part of that kind of team, as opposed to playing a challenger or a lead-up tournament, in Australia. So I think there's a bit of that balance. The Team Australia really struggled with that last year, that they brought their double specialists in and then they didn't play them. They threw, I think, Gadecki and De Minaur in for the doubles when they had to win, and they took and Alan Perez out, so they didn't even get the opportunity to play when that was really what they were all brought in to do. And it's interesting that neither Perez or Ebden here this year. They've gone with Storm Hunter and John Patrick Smith. So that's I think there's still ways that it can be improved, but it is edging in the right direction.
I think they should bring back the Murray River Open, actually, Steve. Oh man, that was a fun tournament. Dan Evans, shout out, 2021 champ.
What a time!
I want to. Let's circle back to United Cup after I rounded the finish with this top 10 discussion with the greatest player of all time and Novak Djokovic. Steve, how many finals did Novak Djokovic participate in 2025?
Was it 2?
3.
So he lost to Menchik in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
He won Athens.
Mm-hmm.
And
he also won Geneva.
Geneva, yep.
Is this the last year we see Novak in the top 10?
I'm going to say no. So it's funny. So he played 20 tournaments. So he played more tournaments than Carlos and Yannick. And only 3 less than, what was it, Fritz, Demonor, Mazzetti, and Shelton. So I think what's going to happen with him is he's going to hang on. I think he'll hang on there until he kind of drops out of the 4 more consistently. I think his advantage at the moment is that he doesn't face Alcaraz or Sinner until the semifinals of a Grand Slam. It's kind of like that gatekeeper for everyone else at the moment. He's like keeping everyone else kind of pushed down below. So when you look like, I think if you look at the top there as well with his losses, he wasn't 100% in Shanghai, but it's losses to Alcaraz, it's losses to Sinner. The clay kind of patch, I don't know. He's never really, I haven't felt that, he came off that loss to Menchik and then lost in Monte Carlo. He's had a few kind of uncharacteristic losses at Monte Carlo over the years. Maybe it's because home's just down the road, or he has stayed down the road there. Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one. I feel like he's doing just enough, I think, at the moment to be able to kind of keep everyone below him. But if those injury things start to crop up a little bit more consistently, I feel like once he drops out of the 10, he's really going to drop out of the 10. Like, I don't think he's going to float. He's not going to float in the 10 to 20 range for an extended period of time. I think once he's not getting to these kind of semifinals and things of Grand Slams, it's going to be a pretty rapid drop off, I think, towards probably retirement.
Once he, I'll say the bull case for his top 10 is he actually went up in wins to 37 from 34 in 2024. But if you look, he reached a peak of 56 in 2023, hasn't cracked 40 since. I mean, I don't think it's unrealistic to think he could be outside the top 10. I think it really is just schedule dependent. I don't think the level is not top 10 level. I just wonder about points and opportunity and how he's going to handle everything. The Vachereau lost. I mean, everyone lost to him. And to your point, his losses are to the other top 5. I do wonder if he finds himself in troubling waters at slams if he does slip down in the ranks a little bit.
Yeah, I think that will be the case a little bit. And I think, and I don't like comparing the top players in this kind of way, but if you think about the back end of the career for Rafael Nadal, there you could count, I reckon, if we rolled through his kind of last 50 matches, I reckon you could count a decent chunk of those where he won just because of his name and that kind of aura that was at the other end of the court, and not so much for his pure skill level. I think I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I reckon there was one against was it Seb Korda at Indian Wells? Something in that kind of space where Korda might have been like a double break up in the deciding set, and Nadal found a way to win. I think there's something in that kind of space. But
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
I think he just had those kind of matches where he wasn't playing anywhere near his best, but you've got players at the other end of the court who have grown up idolizing them or their level and what they could produce. And I think they then struggle at times to kind of get over the line. I mean, there was, how many times did Nadal play in the back end and people were asking for his shirt and stuff afterwards? Like, it's just a different, I think, look for a lot of them. And I think even with Novak this year, you can maybe make a case, was it Taylor Fritz at the US Open? Had all the breakpoint chances in the world, but just couldn't get over the hump. I think mentally, there's a lot of mental scarring, I think, for, Fritz against Novak when you think back through the years. And that you sit there and you go, well, this guy won, more Grand Slams than anyone else that I've played against, and he's beaten me at Grand Slams with torn muscles, in his abdomen and all the other things. Like I think there is a massive mental, aura around Novak still. But once that bubble bursts, as I said, I think the top 10 is going to become top 30, top 50, and then it's how long are we hanging around kind of conversation. I don't think he's quite there yet. I think if he keeps himself fit, I think that's obviously going to be massive for him to kind of maintain that high ranking and kind of pick his spots a little bit more. But I think there's a lot. Once it starts to go wrong, I think it can really snowball.
It's a good point about people needing to get over the mental hurdle of meeting Novak Djokovic. You got to believe. You got to believe.
Yeah. And to an extent, you think about how long it took Novak to build that. And even, Nadal, not to the same extent, but, particularly for Novak. And now you think, Sinner's 24, Alcaraz is 22, and they're already kind of building that. It's, I think it just probably shows how impressive the two of them are compared to the rest. Carlos is the youngest player in the top 18. Him and Holger Rune are 22. Saying he's already got a pretty decent stranglehold on a lot of them, I think, in terms of, mentality and knowing that you're going to have to do everything you can to beat him, and you almost need him to have a bit of an off day. And, Sinner's 24, and the next best behind him are Zverev, who's 28, and Novak, who's 38. So, there's a lot of work to do, I think, for the rest of the top 10 and top 20.
All right, we talked about it being 52 days to the Australian Open qualifying. It's 41 days to the United Cup. Steve, let's get to know these teams real quick. We already talked about it a little bit. Let's go into it a little bit more, and that'll be our final segment of the show. But I think this France team is pretty fascinating because is Rinderknech, Blanchot on the men's side, French Open sensation Boisson on the women's side. So that's pretty cool. But man, I mean, no Big Perry, no Manarino. I mean, this is...
So this is the thing. And I think this is what I was trying to say before, is you look at Team America last year, and it was it Fritz and Tiafoe, I think. And I don't even know if Tiafoe played. Like you look at the second ranked singles players now in all of these teams. It's coming. No one in the top 100 is going to sit there and have a week off. So you look at it, and now it's Mackenzie McDonald, who's the second singles player. You've got Pellegrino for Italy. You think about all the different Italians that could have sat there who were ranked between 22 and 140. Alex de Minaur, you're not sitting behind him. You think about all those players who are sitting outside the top 100 at the moment. Jordan Thompson's not in the top 100 anymore. We've got Chris O'Connell, Hijikata. They're all outside. They need to play. They can't just sit there behind Alex de Minaur and watch and cheerlead for a week. So now I think this is where things are going to be a bit different this year. But if Jack Draper pulls out, how many people are rocking up to watch, Alex de Minaur against Billy Harris and Alexander Zverev or whoever it is that they're kind of drawn up against? So I think there's less room for error, I think, at the top. But if you look at, Team Germany, you've got Zverev playing and, Ava Lees, they're pretty strong. Laura Siegmund's there ranked 46, but she can play doubles. So there's more kind of components to it. I think, Elise Mertens, I would be surprised if she didn't play doubles as well. So it's those players at the top, if you can play the singles and doubles, it's well worth your time. But, I think I'm trying to think back to the American team last year. And I think there was Danielle Collins and something. It was a really strong kind of quartet. And I think Dennis Kudla was there as well to play doubles. And I think he ended up, playing, was it a dead rubber or something along those lines before he retired. But yeah, there's just not a lot of depth in these teams in the same way there was when this first started. And I think it's because the second ranked singles players just don't really get a look in unless the top player gets injured or, something really goes wrong.
You have Hubie back in the fold for Poland. Poland, obviously, I'm just going to assume, not to bring betting back into this, but I assume they will be one of the heavy favorites for the United Cup with Iga leading the women's side. They're usually pretty well favored in these team events with the Hubie Iga tandem. Menchik, Tsitsipas.
I have some concerns for Argentina on the screen here.
I think that they are up against it. Yes,
up against it could be unless he brings his own clay with him. And this is now being played in South America. I think he might be in a little bit of trouble. I mean, I'd like to be proven wrong, but I think Sebi might be who's Argentina playing? So he will be playing against. It hasn't got the split here. There's
hold
the
on.
draw.
Let me see.
He's in a group with USA and Spain. Okay, so he's going to get Munar. So there's going to be a Munar Baez matchup. And then you think about, was it Taylor Fritz? Is it? So Taylor Fritz is going to have his group matches against Baez and Munar. So that seems like a probably good way to spend the first
nice little tune-up
week of January.
Although Munar has been a tough out on hard courts, not to poo-poo Jama Munar, who's had a great 2025, quite frankly.
Absolutely, but I don't know. I'm just going to say it. Like, are we saying that Team Greece versus Team Japan is the hottest matchup in Perth? Like, I don't know.
That is funny. Yes.
Yeah, but I think that the tournament just needs to be hopeful that those top players for the men and women for each country don't get injured in the lead up or pull out, because otherwise, I don't know, you're just not going to get the same feel, I don't think, to this tournament if you've got, players ranked 200 playing against Demonor and Zverev.
Wow. All right, Steve. Well, we did it. We are back in the mix. The All Surface Show is going to be coming in hot for 2026, rounding out 2025. I have to actually prepare to take my own daughter to tennis lessons, and maybe one day I will be talking about her. Unlikely. She's kind of, I think, in it for the social aspect of it right now. She's only 6 years old, so but she is a lefty, so that'll be that is something. So.
That is that. As a lefty myself, it's a handy trait to have. So we'll just get ready for what do we got? So Australian Open Juniors in 2035, 2036.
Just a few short years away.
Book the accommodation.
How old is Maya Joint? She's in the United Cup. She's like what, 17?
No, she's a bit older now. I think she's she played college, didn't she? Did she play college?
Speaking of, how was Michael? I posted this in our chat. How was Michael Zhang still playing college tennis?
It's a good point. Maya's 19, so she's turning 20 in April. She might be someone that would be good to talk about. I think if we want to wrap up the year with some other tournament or other episodes talking about some players who kind of broke out in 2025. She's every chance to be seeded at the Australian Open, which I think is an impressive effort given where she started the year. But we can save that for another time.
All right, do the YouTube thing. Smash that subscribe button, bell icon. I gotta get Steve. I mean, we gotta get set up for this. First of all, we got to do a real, I got to get a real camera. I got to do what's the move. I don't understand the hive mind by every look. It's either going to be the bookcase with all the sports memorabilia, or you got to do the low lights with the blue, like the blue or some sort of color LED in the back.
Okay, I'm gonna get an LED sign for next time. Yeah. I gotta set this room up a bit better if we're going full steam ahead into 2026.
But we will be back for 2026 talking tennis. So if you enjoyed this, we will see you next time.